Welcome to another episode of A Breath of Fresh Jacob, where it's been a really long time since I've sat down to record one of these because I had laryngitis. For those of you that don't know, that means that I talk too much.
I could have told you that.
Today's topic comes from Ungodly Turnip and asks, remakes versus remasters. Well, that's not really a question. Okay, anyway, remakes versus remasters. So this is something that's a little complicated because while it sounds like it should just be the difference between an apple and an orange, it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a gray area in the middle, and that's where people tend to get confused. So what I tell you here in this episode, take it with a grain of salt. So, because I don't know what I'm talking about. Here's the difference, so to speak. I'm going to do my very best, okay? A remaster pretty much keeps everything the same. It's like putting makeup on the original version of the game, so to speak. I mean, you make it look nicer. Pretty much everything stays the same. The plot's going to be the same. The music, for the most part, is going to be the same. It can get a little nip-tuck as well. Example, that might be like Final Fantasy X got its HD remaster like a million times, and it has the original versus the arranged versions, and you can pick which set of music you want. Sometimes the music's the same, sometimes it's slightly enhanced, but even then, it's just a nip-tuck version. You can still recognize it as the original track, just a little nicer or with a full orchestra or something like that. The levels or the maps, depending on the type of game that it is usually the same. Your characters are going to be the same. The gameplay is usually going to be the same. Usually the only thing that really changes is the graphics. That's like the biggest deal. They take like PS1 graphics and make them look a lot more modern. Sometimes this works really nice and can make really good remasters. Sometimes not. Now, a remake, on the other hand, typically changes a lot. It uses inspiration from the original to create something new. And the biggest example of this is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Honestly, if you've played the original game and you've played the remake, it's a remake. The levels are different. Characters themselves, like the names and the way they look and everything is pretty much the same, but the situations they find themselves in are different, and the way that they grow as characters can be different. You have different bosses, you have different environments. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is good. It's really good. And the original is really good. They're both worth playing for completely different reasons. And that's actually one of the things that I like about the concept of a remake. A lot of people get pissy with remakes. It's not the same. Yeah, it's not the same. That's why it's called a fucking remake. I like it when they make a remake that's different enough to where I enjoy both of them for different reasons. Because more than just, oh, I get to play a game I've already played, but it's a little bit better or something like that. It's, oh, this is a whole new game, so it's a whole new experience. And to me, that's more worth it than just an updated version of a game you've already played 50 times. You know what I'm saying? They tend to create something new, but it's still related to its source material in some way. So to me, that's what a remake is. Now, I did mention Final Fantasy X and X-2 remasters is a remaster. Another thing I would say is a remaster would be the Spyro and Crash Bandicoot trilogy remasters, the Reignited and the Insane trilogy. The levels are exactly the same. They might look better, and the mechanics might be slightly different, like with Crash's hitbox, but the levels themselves are the same. You could play through the game just like you play through the original, and it's like, oh, this is the same game. It just looks different and plays just a hair different. To me, those are remasters. If the levels are the same, then the game's the same. Come on. Another example of like a remaster would be... Some people are getting mad at this one. The Master Chief Collection. They just took the games and touched them up graphically. It did lead to some bugs, and it did lead to some inconsistencies in the gameplay and blah, 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 but it was supposed to be a remaster at its core, and definitely not a remake at all. Ooh, so this is actually really good one. So the Wind Waker HD on Wii U is a great example of a remaster that's added a few extra things. So like the Swift Sale, the changes they made to the Picto Box where you can take selfies, and also it can hold more pictures before you have to dump them, and it'll tell you whether or not the picture is good enough for the statue guy. They added those mechanics in, but that doesn't make the game a remake. It's still just a remaster because the game itself is still the same. They just slightly tweak some things. That still, in my mind, makes it a remaster. Basically, anytime a game comes out and it's something HD, it's a remaster, not a remake. I'm sure there's an example out there that's wrong for that. For the most part, if it says HD, it's going to be a remaster, not a remake. Now, if you're asking which one do I prefer, that's not really something I can answer because they're both incredibly different things despite the fact they're very similar. What? I like remasters and I like remakes if they're done right. Sometimes you get really good ones, sometimes you get really bad ones. I heard that, what was it, Chrono Cross that got like one of the two? Probably a remaster. And I heard that it has really bad frame rate. They may have fixed it by now. I haven't looked into it because I don't really care. But, you know, sometimes they end up making it worse than the original, and that's always heartbreaking, especially when you pay today's prices on it. Like... Then again, video games were expensive back in the day, too. Hell, if you account for inflation, Nintendo 64 games, like the cartridges, God, today they'd be like over $100. Anyway, so yeah, remakes. I definitely used Final Fantasy VII as an example there, but another one that I would use would be Ratchet and Clank. So the Ratchet and Clank remake, like based on the movie, I would say that's a remake. The levels are different. They added some new guns to it, but they changed a lot of the way the game is because they made it more like the movie. And honestly, it plays more like a tie-in to the movie. I have conflicting feelings about that, but despite the fact that a lot of the stuff's the same, I would lean more toward a remake than a remaster for that. See what I mean about a gray area in the middle? It's a little wonky. The remake of Resident Evil 2, completely different game. It may take place in the same place, and you may have some of the same characters, but that's a remake. And it's a damn good remake, too. Same thing with Resident Evil 3. I don't think the Resident Evil 3's remake is quite as good as Resident Evil 2's, but it's still really good. Highly recommend if you're a fan of the series. 1 is a bit more complicated as to whether or not it's a remake or a remaster. Wow, I'd really have to break that one down. I might do that some other time. Ooh, I know one. Metroid, the one that came out on 3DS, that's a remake of Metroid 2. Is it Samus Returns? That one's a remake, because it completely changes everything, right? Like, the way that it's designed, the way you do things, like, that's a remake, come on. It's a good one, too. Again, really good game, highly recommend. One thing that I'll leave you on, because I feel like I've definitely talked a lot in circles, but one thing I do want to leave you with, and it's something that I feel like people get wrong. Adding cutscenes does not make it a remake, okay? If a game is like, everything about it's exactly the same except they added a couple extra cutscenes, that does not make it a remake, okay? It's still a remaster or a re-release or whatever. It does not make it a remake. Calm down. I'm completely calm! Well, that was a good question. I feel like a lot of people get a little confused at the difference between remakes and remasters, and I hope that cleared it up a little bit, at least from my perspective. If you think that I'm wrong or you have things you want to add, hey, that's what the comment section's for. Use it. All right, I'm gonna go now. You guys have yourselves a good day. Or night, or whenever you're watching this. Oh boy, 3 a.m. Like, comment, subscribe.